darn it. No, come on, man. Aw, man. Look, I'm disappointed about this, not because I'm a fan of the Edmonton Oilers or I want to see the Edmonton Oilers display the best integrity of the sport that you could give out. Okay, we're talking about the Oilers and the idea of them signing another player with yet another questionable history, but that's not why this pisses me off. This pisses me off because when it comes to this player that we're going to be talking about, it is Tony DeAngelo, offensive defenseman, a guy who can produce points, a guy who can be a power play quarterback. The last time we had spoken about Tony DeAngelo, it was in a video going over the idea of him going to SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL. And I loved that idea. Not because I think, oh, he's a bum, he should belong in Russia, yada, yada, yada. No. I selfishly looked at that Tony DeAngelo conversation and thought it was brilliant because he could be playing with Ivan Demidov, and that was a really big thing. I loved the thought of Demidov getting a pure offensively minded defenseman to play on the power play with, and especially hearing that the Montreal Canadiens prospect, 5th overall guy, is going to be given a top role with the team. It just makes everything else even better, right? I mean, you build the team around this guy, you allow him to develop his skills. If he gets like a point-per-game season in the KHL as an 18-year-old, you're laughing. It's really, really great. And I was like, yeah, this guy's going to help out in that respect. And now it appears that maybe that's not going to happen. Who really knows? I mean, okay, we're talking about Tony DeAngelo. Stop talking about Ivan Demidov, Lego. Save your hedonistic commentary for the other videos on this channel. But today what we're doing is going over to an article published by David Staples on EdmontonJournal.com. This was from earlier 2 days ago, talking about how the Edmonton Oilers are considering a trade that would shake things up via a top NHL insider. The article goes out there and talks about the Oilers, it talks about their situation, essentially to bolster up what we're talking about here. Let's read the opening parts of this piece. This in from NHL insider Frank Saravalli of the Daily Faceoff, his take that the Edmonton Oilers are considering a significant trade, not just bringing in a veteran D-man on a PTO. Talking with Cam Moon and Brendan Escott and Oilers Now, Saravalli said the Oilers have options. They're pursuing those options. There are other things that Edmonton is looking at, I think, including a potential trade that could shake things up a little bit more than maybe just the PTO route. This trade could happen before training camp, Saravalli said. The thing is, it's so fluid right now, I think there are 7 different scenarios that Stan Bowman and his staff are probably looking at. They're looking at a lot of different options around the league. And so, essentially, what's going on here? The Oilers need to do something. They just lost out on Broberg, they just lost out on Holloway, they got Ty Emberson in exchange for Cody Ceci, they got Vasily Podkolzin for a draft pick, but there is still a need for another defenseman. As much as I love Troy Stecher, I actually saw him yesterday at the Troy Stecher Foundation Minoru Arena's hockey camp that was going on. As much as I love the guy, him playing 82 games in an NHL season next year isn't something that I think a lot of Oilers fans would feel comfortable with. And having Ty Emberson as a guy to take up even more minutes than Stecher kind of rings some alarm bells a little bit as well. So, when it comes to potential options, the Oilers are apparently considering them. And Saravalli also mentioned on the podcast that the Oilers should be interested in Tony DeAngelo, 28, whom he argued is a better player than any of the other unsigned veterans such as Tyson Barrie, Justin Schultz, and Kevin Shattenkirk. DeAngelo was waived by the Rangers in 2021 after he provoked a fistfight with teammate Alexander Georgiev. DeAngelo has admitted to being a hothead in the past. Yeah, a hothead, a guy who yells racial slurs, not at the opponents, but at his own teammates. In fact, maybe his opponents too, who really knows. But Tony DeAngelo definitely does not have the clean as a whistle reputation from around the NHL and around the world of hockey. There have been so many instances with this guy over the years, and being a hothead, quote-unquote, I think only barely scratches the surface. All the intel that I have, though, is that he's a really well-liked teammate, Saravalli said. Have there been some skirmishes that have popped up over the course of a career? Did he gain notoriety for his Twitter account? Those things are all true. Some of them are true, some of them have become legend, but I think what you're talking about is the potential for a 50-point defenseman on your team that is still in his 20s, that is ready, willing, and able to play for close to league minimum and would absolutely love to be in Edmonton. If the goal is to win, you can't hold a popularity contest when it comes to bringing in players, Saravelli said. Are we looking to have a team of nice guys who win in the community, or are we looking to have a team that wins a Stanley Cup? I think there is a way to blend both of those missions. Well, Saravelli, blending both, I mean, if you're blending both of them, that implies that a little bit of both is being taken into consideration. Saravelli, man, DeAngelo doesn't win with the community, he's not a nice guy. I think that's contradictory, but either way, leave it to the Edmonton Oilers beat to come up with this idea. I know Saravelli isn't necessarily the Oilers beat, but he spoke on an Oilers show, of signing yet another guy who's got a questionable past. You talk about Stan Bowman, you talk about Evander Kane, you talk about Corey Perry, you talk about Jake Virtanen. Everybody with a questionable past seems to find themselves in the Edmonton Oilers organization. Some way or another, it happens. And I don't want to say anything about that. We'll just leave it there and move on to what the writer of this article, David Staples, responds to in regards to this Saravelli DeAngelo thing. As I said before, I see DeAngelo as a good bet. Staples writes, if there are any real questions about character, Darnell Nurse can help answer them, as he was DeAngelo's teammate for half a year in Sault Ste. Marie. DeAngelo had an iffy regular season in 23-24, playing just 31 games with only 11 points and a -7, but he was solid enough to play 9 games in the playoffs, and in the 2 previous seasons he had 42 points in 70 games and 51 points in 64 games. Of course, he worked the power play in both those seasons, but who is to say Evan Bouchard will have perfect health this year? Would it not be wise to have a high-powered backup on the payroll? DeAngelo could well be that player, and he's been between 4 and 6 years younger than other players mentioned just now as Tyson Barrie, Schultz, and Shattenkirk. At the end of the article, this is what Staples writes, it's good to see Saravelli stand up for second chances for players like Tony DeAngelo. This is the age of cancellation and rapid, self-righteous, and sometimes merciless judgment, often based on the barest of facts or misinformation. It's also the case that the road to success isn't paved by angels, nor the blustering armchair critics, but by individuals who know how to work with others and get the task at hand done well. If DeAngelo is such an individual, he should be welcome on the Oilers. And here's the thing. You can have your thoughts about cancel culture and everything. The Oilers certainly have had no problems in negating that when it comes to signing players. But at the same time, you have to recognize what happened to a lot of these guys. Jake Virtanen was signed to a PTO. He stunk. Terrible hockey player. He left. Then he went to Europe, and he had problems over there too. Then you have yourselves Evander Kane, whom, okay, I'm gonna say that he was like fine for a good chunk of his Oilers time, but the health issues, they caught up, and plus the baggage with his former partner, it's so difficult to see all over the place there. Evander Kane hasn't really worked out to the best of his capacity either. Corey Perry, while he was okay, it's not like the guy went out there and actually did as much damage as he could have. And then Stan Bowman, you want to talk about cancel culture. I mean, there was an entire gosh darn petition to get this guy out. It didn't work, but there was a petition. And it was a lot of Oilers fans going out there and signing that. The point that I'm trying to make here is, even though sometimes you could say the Oilers are standing up for guys, fighting the good fight by giving these players second chances, a lot of the times the second chances don't even work out. And you start thinking about it like, okay, the chance that it does work versus the chance that it doesn't work. Tony DeAngelo was not great this previous season. Maybe he could be better. Who really knows? But if he doesn't work, which is a very legitimate possibility, is it worth going through all of the turmoil and the backlash and the questions, all the people talking about standards and ethics and everything? Is it worth it to go through that PR nightmare for a, let's say, 25-30% chance that Tony DeAngelo is a 50-point caliber player? Is it worth it to go for a guy that has an 80% chance of not being good and just completely fizzling out? Is it worth it to go through all of that backlash and public turmoil because you gave that guy an opportunity? I get it, it's go big or go home, baby. But is Tony DeAngelo going to be a better NHL player in 2024-2025 than Tyson Barrie, for example? That's the question you gotta ask yourself, and the magnitude as to how much you think DeAngelo could be better is going to determine your risk tolerance as to whether or not you feel comfortable making that signing public and having everybody criticize you, because of course they're going to. This is why the KHL route was one that I liked a lot, because Tony DeAngelo can go over to SK St. Petersburg and no one's going to bat an eye, and Ivan Demidov is going to get that offensive power play puck-moving defenseman teammate. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Tony DeAngelo and the Oilers. I hope you enjoyed this video. and bye.